Hello and good evening. It's Revelicious D here, one half of the Conversationally Thriving with Lymphedema family. And we are here tonight to have part two of our Health Inequities panel. And we are going to be diving deep tonight. So I'd like to bring on our panelists as we enter into a conversation about health inequities. We've got some familiar faces here, and we'll take a moment for everybody to just do a quick little intro of themselves. Hardeep, do you want to give us a start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Hardeep, and I live in Toronto, Canada. And I don't know what else you want us to say, but I have lymphedema.
Yeah. Who you are and why this is so important to you, I think would be really, a great way for us to start this.
Okay. So in the last year, outside of lymphedema, I've had to deal with the healthcare system quite a bit, and I've had a hard time. So I've become very passionate about it in the last year because of that.
Understandable. Patty?
Hi, I'm Patty. I am the founder of Lipedema Fitness, and I bring the lipedema into the lymphedema. I have both. And, getting diagnosed initially was quite challenging, and symptoms and trying to figure things out. And healthcare just adds a whole nother component to kind of trying to manage your own self-care.
All right. Kelly, we'll jump to you first.
I'm Kelly Bell. I go under the tag Veteran Fighting Lymphedema. I've had lymphedema for almost 18 years. I'm the chair of the North Carolina chapter of the Lymphatic Education Research Network. Last year we had some good successes with getting access to $362 million in funds for research. And I was pretty instrumental in that. I'm a huge patient advocate for just wanting to find a cure for what we all struggle with. And as Brittany's kids, breaks my heart to know that, as an adult, this is difficult, but being a parent of a child, I can only imagine. And so for me, it's something I won't put down until we find a cure.
Okay. Brittany?
I am Brittany Williams. I am the founder of Bryland's Feet Foundation, which is the first and only nonprofit in the world specific to pediatric lymphedema. I started the foundation in 2018. It was inspired by my daughter, Bryland, who was born with infant onset primary lymphedema. And we have children all over the world that we support. So I'm here for the kids.
All right. Well, I welcome you all. And as we start into this conversation, I just want to say that we're entering into what is now recognized as a Minority Health Month. And it's really appropriate that we're having this conversation because we want to make sure that we all understand the ways that we can work towards the best outcomes possible for everyone. So I'll go through just a couple definitions so that everyone is clearly understanding what health inequities means and what health equity means. So as defined by the WHO, the World Health Organization, health inequities are systematic differences in health. Inequities are differences in health status or in the distribution of health resources between different population groups arising from the social conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. Some groups benefit from the design of systems that the things we all need, such as education or housing, while other groups do not. Inequities can persist over time, as these systems can repeat and reinforce patterns of exclusion and marginalization. Comparatively, health equity is the absence of unfair systems and the policies that cause health inequities. Health equity seeks to reduce inequalities and to increase access to those opportunities and conditions conducive to health for all. Health equity is a state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain the highest level of health. So that brings me to our first question. So barriers to health equity are boundless and extend into every social, political, economic, and cultural domain. Access to healthcare facilities may be by our geographic difference or distance, lack of transportation, employment requirements, or confinement due to things like incarceration, refugee status, political factors, all of the ones that we know are streaming across the news these days. So, what do you think and what do you believe are the big barriers to health equity for patients living with chronic illnesses like lymphedema? Anybody can start.
For me, it seems, I'm not going to talk about the obvious, but I've really been struggling with just not enough medical professionals in my area. Like, I'm really struggling to find somebody who has any idea what lipedema is. And I've been looking for years. I was diagnosed in 2007, and that came from a CLT, not a doctor. That came from me finding a patient's blog talking about lipedema and then doing what they suggested and digging and finding VODR trained lymphedema therapists in my area to go to see them to finally get a diagnosis. And I mean, that in itself has just been, kind of challenging, and it seems to be getting worse now that I'm going through menopause.
Okay.
So aging for me, I guess, would be my...
Yes. Well, and that's another barrier, right?
Yeah.
Aging is another barrier that comes into play with this. Who wants to go next?
I would say to piggyback off of that. Obviously, the kids suffer quite a lot because we don't have access to even CLTs. Let's forget about the physicians or getting the diagnosis. Okay, great. We have a diagnosis finally, which in my own specific case, we live in Arizona. We were not able to find anyone to help us in Arizona diagnose Brylan. I'm originally from Chicago. We went to Chicago and used our resources there. Still no one. So we had to fly to Boston Children's Hospital to get her diagnosed. Not everyone can do that. And then even once we were diagnosed, we weren't given any instructions of what to do next. We were told to go home, put her in tight socks, and in a couple of years, we'll reassess the situation and see how she's doing. And they basically told me that she was too young to withstand treatment. So, okay, so now you're telling me this is a chronic progressive disease that is incurable at this time, and you want me to go home and do nothing while I'm watching my daughter's leg continue, progress, the swelling progress up her leg. Using her young age as a crutch wasn't an option for me, but even in my own very stubborn mama bear ways, it was me cold calling clinics and asking, hey, will you treat my child who was 11 months old? I got a lot of hangups. I got a lot of, sorry, we don't treat children. I even got some that said children cannot have lymphedema, which was extremely frustrating because here I am, a mom new to this, and I'm being told by medical professionals, no, your daughter doesn't have this. This isn't right. Kids cannot have lymphedema, which is, as we all know, wrong. But it's even the clinicians. Pediatric patients oftentimes don't even have access to the clinicians to get proper treatment, simply because they don't understand how to make certain modifications to treat the child. And it is, I can tell you, it is the simplest modifications. You are doing the same treatment, it is just on a smaller body. So I think, yes, doctors are a huge hurdle, not having enough knowledgeable doctors, but it's also clinicians that aren't in that space specific for pediatrics, which is extremely frustrating as a mom and someone who supports children all over the world. This happens not just in the US, but it is all over. We have recipients in 24 different countries right now, and they all have the same issue. It is a global issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think we all, we have to take a step back and remember, what does it mean for a little person, right? We're adults. We can logically make sense of some things sometimes, and even none of this might not make sense when a little one has to try and figure out what's going on and then wonder when you fix it because they're literally telling you in the same room. It's got to be extremely frustrating. Kelly, what about you?
For me, is the obvious is, and the the approach of the obesity aspect that gets thrown into it. My story, I always tell people, I was a very healthy person before they injected plastic into my thoracic duct and lymphatic system, and um, like blocked like lymph nodes all over my organs and my system. And what was funny and it wasn't funny, was I never knew that stereotype and that struggle of getting over that, especially when you mess with the lymphatic systems in your central lymphatics. It can actually present like your lipid metabolism goes crazy because your lymphatics have a huge part in that. And so they interpret that as you being obese. And so seeing that hurdle, like as a military guy, I mean, one, I was punished for being overweight. Like, in the meantime, I'm battling for my life after this struggle. And when the obesity factor gets in, that is their easy out. It's like, oh, well, you need to watch what you're eating. I mean, I have it documented where I was sitting with a doctor who claimed to be a lymphatic specialist, and I'm a big guy, like a 6 foot, well over 250 pounds, but at that time I wasn't. But I was a big guy anyway, and I was eating between 1,000 and 1,200 calories, and I was vegetarian at the time. And he said, well, okay, well, we got you eating right, which was not right. We just need to get you exercising more. And because of where I'm damaged, that causes me to swell even more the weight. And so it's just like he didn't get it. So I think the challenge for me has always been like, that's why I don't give up. Because I mean, to be honest, like after dealing with that from 2005 to 2009, where I was really bad, and like it made me suicidal. I mean, I had a gun in my hand at one point. It was just to the point of like no work. And I've been dealing with it for almost 18 years. And I mean, I'm a military guy, so that's why I look at Brittany as a mom, telling you there'd be some doctors in trouble if I was in Brittany's situation, because it's very frustrating to see the flippant attitude that's thrown towards people who are struggling with these diseases. It's like it's our fault. And for me, it's not a cosmetic issue, and I don't think it's cosmetic for a lot of patients. My organs are battling this stuff. My head now is involved because of what's been happening in my trunk. And so these are serious issues that need to be taken seriously. And I was watching a podcast recently that are of doctors that are kind of getting into the world of lymphatics and starting to share it. And I think after the second episode, the host asked a very profound question to me. He goes, so how do you guys plan on getting the word out? And they literally said, and there's 6 doctors who are like, well, just have your patients come to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not how we resolve this. I mean, it was frustrating. I mean, we need to make this a moment. And that's why for me, telling you need to advocate. And if you find those doctors working in the lymphatic community, to support them, because they're in a very underfunded, it's not understood position. And they're all overworked. The therapists, I mean, to get a therapist now takes months sometimes, because we're learning about it, but we're still not trying to treat it. So.
Okay. Thanks for that. Hardeep?
So similar to what Patty was saying about having access to healthcare professionals who deal with lymphedema, I was diagnosed very early, so when I was 6 months old, so my story is a little different. I was diagnosed, and I did have a doctor that was a lymphedema specialist. He didn't really do anything for me, but he referred me to a therapist who taught me about compression, about bandaging, about using a pump. And then when I turned 18, I was referred to a different lymphedema specialist at an adult hospital. And I saw them for a few years, and they basically told me that there's nothing that they could do for me anymore. So there's no point of me continuing to see them. So I actually haven't even been to a lymphedema doctor in years. I don't have one. And I also know that it's very difficult to find one from just talking to people in Toronto and trying to see who I could go to. But at the same time, I was told that there's nothing that they can do for me. So I'm kind of just I've been on my own, doing my own thing, trying to learn new techniques from other people who have lymphedema. That's been helpful. So I do feel like there's like a disconnect, and there's just not enough medical professionals who know about lymphedema or know how to help you. I feel like you're just kind of left on your own. In my experience, at least, that's how I feel. And I mean, I've been doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good, thankfully, in that department. So yeah, that's, I think, a barrier to healthcare for us as medical professionals. We need more of them.
I think Deborah froze.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean, if you bring a valid point to this, though, I mean, I did a presentation in Boston not too long ago. And one of the things is I've been battling this for 17 plus years, and I still don't have a doctor who can treat me. And usually they're like, oh, well, I'll help you. And then, like, even the ones in the lymphatic world, then when I show them my case, they're like, oh, well, I don't even know where to start. And I'm like,
yeah,
I understand.
yeah.
So I understand your struggle, because it is like we're carrying it on our own.
Yeah, like even when I have to get paperwork signed to get my garments covered, I'll go to like a family doctor, not a family doctor, or just like a doctor, because I'll just show them my arm and be like, see, it's very obvious that I have lymphedema. And they'll be like, yes, you do. But a lot of them are like confused, because they're like, how did you get it? Did you have breast cancer? And I'm like, no, I was born with it. And there was one doctor who told me that that's not like possible. And I was like, but it is. I was born with it.
I've seen that recently too, and it does get quite frustrating. You're like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, we can't be that far ahead of the medical community, but we are. And so I think what Deborah and their group's doing, and like these, anytime we get to present, a chance to talk, to share, like this is an issue, and we need to take it as like a full like attack. We need like fighting. Like, there's a reason I put veteran fighting lymphedema. There's nothing easy about this disease.
Yeah. Is Deborah frozen again?
I think so.
Another thing that I think is also a barrier is insurance covering things. Like, I'm currently not covered for compression. And I know the Lymphedema Treatment Act just got passed, and that's fantastic. I'm so excited about that. But I'll still, because I have secondary lymphedema, I'll be able to hopefully get those garments covered. But somebody who has straight lymphedema will not, because you need a diagnosis of lymphedema. So it's like our community really struggles. It's like we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
And this is crazy. If you guys, I was up on Capitol Hill for a couple of those, and it, like, the fact that they weren't covered was actually an oversight. So is that just like another oversight that we could possibly, because I know Heather and Sarah and the group was in DC recently trying to make sure there were no gaps. And so I don't know.
Yeah, I just had Sarah on a live, and she said that you definitely do need to have lymphedema as your diagnosis to get it covered currently with the upcoming.
Are you all in the States, in the US?
I am in the US.
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay, I'm the only one in Canada then, I think. Yeah. I thankfully actually do have coverage for my compression garments, and but I do notice, like, when I get my form filled out to get a lymphedema pump, people who have secondary lymphedema do not get coverage for a pump. And I always think about that, and it's just like I don't know why that's any different, right? Like, it should be for everyone. If it's covered, it should be for everyone.
And in our area, lymphedema is only covered as a result of breast cancer.
Oh. Right.
If you have primary lymphedema, you don't get coverage for your compression. So that is hopefully getting changed with the Treatment Act getting passed.
Yeah, I hope so too, because like breast cancer, like, God bless them, they made it an issue, right? And so around between 68 and 70,000 people actually have lymphedema from breast cancer. But NIH, during their presentation last September, one of the presenters said, we're estimating between 27 and 44% of patients who've received like cancer treatment in their abdomen and trunk, like like ovarian or bladder or hysterectomies or colon or like even heart, lungs, but they're estimating that like that's as high as that. So I did the calculation from 2021 numbers, and like 1.2 million people had surgeries. That means there's 360 people every year joining our community that aren't getting treatment. Like they're focusing on arms and legs rather than like what really is like the critical mass stuff. And
when you look at the numbers, they're so astronomical that it doesn't make sense that there isn't help, that there isn't resources, that there isn't a structured program, a basic protocol even. It doesn't make any sense. The numbers are crazy. More people have lymphedema than, what is it, ALS, MS, muscular dystrophy, and Parkinson's, and AIDS combined. We have structures, all of those
have a
diseases.
lymphatic component to it. That's the crazy thing.
Yes,
it's
very
actually
true.
Lymphatics. I mean, that's the crazy thing, and it's like, so, and I think one of the challenges is we focus on the cosmetic aspect, the way we look, but there's actually, especially in my case, but I think more cases, and that's why I'm always pushing central lymphatic. There's other serious comorbidities that we're battling because of those issues, and so
I mean, look at cellulitis infections. I mean, that's a huge aspect. And because we don't have knowledgeable doctors, we actually had a little girl who's one of our recipients in Wisconsin. She had her adenoids, tonsils, and tubes put in her ears. Throughout the surgery, they did not give her proper antibiotics. They didn't do any kind of precautionary measures for her lymphedema. Her mom reached out and she's sending me photos. And I'm like, she has cellulitis. You need to take her in. She took her into 2 different hospitals. Both hospitals rejected her, wouldn't listen to her parents. Guess what happened? She went into sepsis. She, instead of just giving her the antibiotic when needed, and instead of this little, she's barely a year old, this little baby going through medical trauma that is completely unnecessary, she went into life-threatening conditions because we don't have knowledgeable doctors. And even so, the doctors don't want to listen to parents. They don't want to listen to the patients because they're the doctors and they think that they know best. One of the biggest things that we push is advocacy and making sure you push for your kiddo. You, even for yourself, if you're a patient that has lymphedema, you have to push. You know your body best, and chances are, I would say 99% of the time, you probably know about your lymphedema more than your doctor does, or more than an ER doctor when you're going into them. Brylan actually just had cellulitis 2 weeks ago, and we kind of went through the same struggles of, I took her into the hospital. Thankfully, the initial doctor listened to me, saw how sick she was, and got her immediate IV antibiotics. But then they were wanting to do x-rays and CT scans because they're like, oh, well, she must have a broken ankle. She must have a broken something. And I'm like, she doesn't. She has lymphedema.
Okay.
Like, well, it's just one of those things such as that. Like the infection aspect of it is huge. We need more physicians, knowledgeable doctors, people that we have as a resource. We need a standardized protocol even. I mean, there's so many gaps in the community, not just for insurance coverage, but for actual treatment. There is a huge gap. There isn't a global consensus on treatment for lymphedema.
There isn't, is there? And I think there's a really hard line that maybe we as patients have to draw to be able to create that opportunity of identity, that there's a loss, there's a deficit that needs to be filled. We're an empty bucket that's running with more holes in it than we can fill, right? Because the good thing about us being advocates and talking more about things means more people get identified. And then how do we service those more people that are now learning that they can have a voice about what they need?
Yeah, I can honestly tell you, some people will question how important their voice is. And I can tell you, it's invaluable. I've had 6 doctors now, starting with the day I actually got my lymphoscintigraphy. The radiologist looked at me and he said, "I don't know why we're doing this. We can't treat it." And I'm like, "What's that matter?" He goes, "We don't like to diagnose what we can't treat." And I'm like, "Well, that's utter, like, from an engineering standpoint, it's like, so how do we design something? Like, how do we know we need to fix something if you don't diagnose it?" And I was like, from an advocacy standpoint, that's utterly ridiculous. Like, I'm on Capitol Hill, they're wanting numbers, and I'm like, I don't know, you're gonna have to train your doctors first so they can diagnose us. And I said, that's the ridiculous thing. And so the way to change that is like let people know just how serious this condition is.
Right.
Like Brittany said, like these kids are battling for their lives. I mean, and for me, I'm 55 now, so maybe 20 more years of this. But these kids got an entire life, and I just want them to have a life. I want everybody to have a life because this is, I never realized, I mean, I'm a veteran, right? So I'm fighting for people's freedoms, and to have a disease that is so ignored that affects so many people worldwide, like you're over 200 million people worldwide, and we're still begging. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, it makes no sense. I deal with people from Canada that reach out that have central lymphatic issues and like ask me like how to do this, and I'm like trying to figure out your guys's. I thought we had some messed up like insurance stuff. Man, Canada, I mean, it really depends on where you live, and then it's still not. It's just odd.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. I think maybe for you, our neighbors to the south, understanding how our medical system works and how we access things. But while we may not have as many splits in our country as you all do with all your states, we have provinces that don't talk to each other. They don't work with each other for the better good of everyone. And that's a real shame, because you'll see people out on the west that will have even less access than we have in Ontario. And Hardeep and I are lucky enough to be living in this province. You go even further east and you're into Quebec and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and all the East Coast provinces. They've got even less because their population is lower. So therefore, there isn't even the idea of having someone specially trained. It's all centralized and very generic. I think one of the things that we wanted to try and speak to also is just that mental health inequality status as well, right? Because we're just speaking about it. What are those kids going through? What are we going through as adults? And how are you going through it as a parent, being a caregiver to someone? How does that look? And, I'd really like to know your opinions and your thoughts on if you've noticed anything within our healthcare systems that even is speaking to that or scratching the surface on that idea of the mental health aspect to it.
My personal opinion, I think the advocacy groups are taking it up because they're realizing that whether it be, any advocacy group, they're talking about it because it's a big deal. I mean, like I'm a big guy. I've seen a lot of things. I've like a lot of death and like, but I will go, and I've been through a lot of things, but seeing the trauma I've gone through with lymphatics, I mean, and the fact it had me to the point where I wanted to like end my life. I mean, and that's the doctors that it wasn't just a struggling. It was the other challenges of getting through the doctors that like, and you want to talk about advocating. I actually had a doctor up by his throat once. I mean, seriously, because he was telling me like it must be in your head, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I have plastic that glows when you hit me with cancer with a CAT scan. So I mean, yeah, I think the only people I see really trying to address it are the advocacy groups. I don't think the medical community's really gotten there. I had to take my own time and spend a year focusing on just my mental health because I'd gotten so bitter and so angry. I was just toxic.
Yeah. I think we're all shaking our heads. Yes. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last year for me was a big refocus on the emotional side of living with the chronic illness, because I spend so much time on the physical side and trying to get that across that it's so important to stay active. And we've really changed a lot of how we're treated. And when I was diagnosed, we were told not to exercise. It was going to make our symptoms worse. And we've really changed a lot of that, which is great, because now I get people telling me their doctors recommended they find our group, which is like full circle. But the emotional side really stepped up last year for me. And it was like, you really need to focus on this. And I was lucky enough to partner with another group, the Lymphedema Journey, with April, and we did a combined mindful movement for the whole month of January. And it was amazing to really slow down. And I took the point of view of adding mindfulness to movement, and she took the point of view of adding movement to the mindful side. And just partnering with other people, and then getting people within our group being part of that, and they're sharing, and then taking that to our doctors and, pitching for, we need this. We need to be
Right.
seen with this. It's so important. But at the conference last year, I'm getting ready to go to FDRS in a couple of weeks. Last year's conference, it was really nice to see some of the lipedema physical therapists talking specifically about the emotional side, and training for doctors in dealing with the emotional side of a patient as well.
Okay. Good. Hardeep, what do you think?
I don't feel like I've noticed any signs that the healthcare system is working on the mental health aspect of things. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have nothing.
No, but you and I belong, and Bisa belong to a group that is now formed with our FitArt, right?
Oh, that's true.
Right.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
but
right.
that's not somebody who is directly in a medical office, right? Yeah. We're going to someone who is intimately aware of what's going on with our body.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I completely forgot about that. That's something that we've done on our own, I guess. Yeah, so we've taken the initiative.
Which is what everybody is speaking to, right? Is that it's hard, and Kelly, you've spoken to this too, it's really hard to, I think, incite or incentivize someone who has no idea how to use their voice to suddenly start using it, but to introduce them to a group or a collective that they can see themselves represented. I think that's what probably one of the most empowering things. And yeah, sadly, the medical people that are actually paying attention are few and far between, and they are doing like 10 times a person's duty sometimes if they're actively engaged with our community, right? And they can only spread themselves so thin. And as Kelly, you threw out that 200 million number. It's insanity, as far as I'm concerned, to think that that's something that should be ignored. For us, it's 1/10 of our population. That's 1/10 of a population of a country. How is that supposed to be minimized or not counted? One of the things I think that we talk about, and Brittany, do you want to pipe in a little bit more just about if you have seen versus not seen?
Unfortunately, kind of the consensus, I think, with everyone is that it's mainly the advocacy groups, it's the patients, the advocates that are really pushing the mental health aspect, because there's so many gaps when it comes to clinicians and medical professionals just treating lymphedema. I don't even think they take a second look at the mental aspect, because they haven't even gotten a grip on the treatment aspect and knowing what proper care is and the protocols and what is needed to treat or even diagnose. So I think it's a lot of times the advocates, and we're making moves. It's incredibly powerful. I think at any age, to know someone who has lymphedema and to be able to have a support system in them, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there's other people out there that have had the same struggles and the same triumphs as you. One of the things that we have through Bryland's Feet Foundation is Camp Watch Me. And one of my favorite stories was there was a little girl that came to camp. They hadn't even arrived at camp yet. They were at the airport, and her mom said that she refused, since she was diagnosed, for the past 2 years to wear shorts. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to show her garments. And she saw another little boy at the airport, and she was like, Mom, this little boy, look, he has garments on. And she was like, yeah, honey, he's probably going to camp. You want to go talk to him? Let's go see if he's going to camp. And then they talked for a couple of minutes. The moms were talking, and the little girl tugged on her mom. And she was like, Mom, can we go to the bathroom? And she was like, why? Do you have to go potty? We just got off the plane, whatever. And she was like, no, I want to put my shorts on. That is
So
huge
powerful.
for a child. Huge.
Yeah.
And I still get emotional talking about that because it seems so simple. Okay, a kid wants to put shorts on. She didn't wear shorts for 2 years prior to that because she felt alone, because she was scared and she didn't know how to like step out of her comfort zone. But seeing that one little boy, I was like, okay, we can all go home. Camp was a success. Like, we're good to go. Because she put
Tick the
shorts on.
box. There you
Yes.
go.
But it
Yeah.
takes
Bravo.
it's one step at a time, one little notion, one little thing that we can do for each other makes a world of difference. And if
Yeah.
we all continue, like Kelly said, to speak out, to use our voice, to share photos, to share our stories, share all of these things, it will make a difference. It's slow rolling,
Yeah.
you know, does make a difference. And for that little girl, she wears shorts now all the time. Like, that's huge.
But we're
So
the pebble,
life-changing.
right?
Yes.
We're the pebble. And I think people forget how strong those ripples can be, because those ripples can become waves. And the more that we educate our practitioners, right? I mean, I am sure we've all had to do this, educating the person who's supposed to know more than us to take care of us. But that brings me to the next question, you know, talking about the relationships that we as patients have with healthcare providers and how crucial that is to improve and maintain our well-being. Unfortunately, far too often, you know, we hear reports of patients feeling anxious, feeling worried about the treatment they're going to receive during those medical appointments, which I'm sure we've probably all experienced. And many of those leave us feeling very judged, very unheard, feeling like they didn't get the info that they went there for or the support to improve their condition. But there are providers out there. There are amazing people that can understand us. I'm just wondering if you can share some examples of anyone that has come across your path that you feel made you feel comfortable or safe working with them to try and work on your health condition.
Okay, so I'll start. This isn't lymphedema related, but last year I had a hernia and it was undiagnosed for months. I went to the ER so many times, and 2 times the doctor ignored me and sent me home and said that I was just, he said that because I have lymphedema, that he thinks that the bump, the hernia bump, is just fluid buildup. And I kept telling them it's really painful. And I don't think it's just fluid, like it hurts, like I can't stand for longer than 30 minutes. So I got ignored for months. And the 3rd time I went to the ER, I didn't want to go, but I had to go because this thing was not going away and it was impacting my life. And that ER doctor listened to me. He acknowledged how I felt. He didn't dismiss me. And I mean, I'm so thankful to him because I ended up getting hernia surgery after that. And he's the one who diagnosed me. And I mean, I was so thankful that day. Like it had been like 4 months of just running in circles, trying to tell. And I told people I have a hernia. I researched it because I had no other option. Like I was going crazy. And yeah, so that doctor, that ER doctor, I will give him credit. He helped me big time.
Right. Score 1. There has to be one. There has to be one. There we go. There we go.
Close the podcast. 1 success. Anybody else?
Well, I know in the beginning, because I am a 2-time cancer survivor, and my most recent one was breast cancer, and it was challenging at first because I got rushed into my treatment very quickly. And so I didn't have an opportunity to do any of the little sessions they did talking about lymphedema or breast cancer surgery recovery or any of that. And thankfully, I had someone who worked in the hospital system, and they were great with me and allowed me to ask a huge amount of questions. My surgeon was actually really great, but it has been now 7 years since I had that surgery, which created the lymphedema. And I now deal with a pain management surgeon who's amazing and listens to me and understands that while we go in to repair nerves or to deaden nerves that are in my affected area, that he has to be mindful of that. And he really appreciates that I'm the type of patient who knows how to use my voice, because even in the waiting room, he will come out and he'll come out to talk to me, and I'll have been carrying on a conversation with some other patient in the waiting room, and he's like, what is going on? He's like, how do I figure out how to incorporate this? Because for him, he gets it. He understands that patient advocate is the best conduit for him to be able to extend his care. But I'm not in the lymphedema clinic anymore. And I have to get a regular GP now to assess me. I have to renew my insurance forms. And it's really challenging to go, well, which doctor can I go to? Who's going to take the time to take my appointment to go get reassessed again? Do I have to go through all the steps when I've been living and breathing this for the last 7 years?
Right.
I feel it's shameful sometimes that we have to re-explain our story a gazillion times over. But someone who walks in with a cut or something else bleeding, immediately, what can we do to help you? Let's get on this right away. But because we deal quite often with, even if we're swelling or we're wearing garments, which we think are visible, it's amazing how invisible that actually is.
Yeah.
Let me put this in a little perspective for you, because it was for me.
Yeah.
I've been dealing with since 2005. 2008, I was in DC and I was being seen at Walter Reed, and that's where a lot of our soldiers come back. And after a while of going through specialists that had no answers and things like that, I was seeing a vascular surgeon, and he looked at me and he's like, I don't see anything vascular wrong with you. And I was dealing with a lot of pain. I deal with a lot of pain because it hurts. It's painful. Yeah. And so I was at the end of my wits end because of administrative stuff along with the medical stuff. And I just broke down. And then working with those guys, you see those guys who's lost arms and legs and things. And the vascular surgeon said, buddy, he goes, I'm going to be honest. He said, we know more about how to put them together than how to deal with you. And he goes, your journey is going to be 10 times harder than theirs. Mm-hmm. And so here I am almost 18 years out, and I still don't have a doctor that treats me. So that's a perspective that we are at with a disease of over 200 million people.
Yeah.
So just think about that. And so for me, that helps me. Like I tell people all the time, work from peace, because the anger doesn't get you anywhere. I tried for years. And so find your peace in you. Keep your expectations low, but don't let it kill you. Like anytime something progresses, I give myself 24 hours to be up, like in that funk, and then I say, well, you got to move forward. And
but that's that mind, that's that mental health piece, right? That's that understanding that you can work through it, even though that wall is still there of resistance.
Yeah.
How do you build in that mental health piece? And it usually ends up us either finding a collective of people or learning how to find it in ourselves first. Right. And that's probably even harder when we're talking about children, because how do you deal with a child who doesn't even know how to manage their emotions on a general stream? And then you throw this into the mix. Brittany, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
So obviously Brylan's 9 years old. So she's been diagnosed since she was 11 months. And she's had her little spouts here and there where she's, I want to say, feels sorry for herself or, gets down on herself and says, well, why don't my brothers have this? She has 3 brothers. No one has lymphedema. She's the only one. We don't have a family history of it. Why me? Why do I have to be the only girl? And why do I have to have lymphedema? And we see this all the time with the kids that we support through the foundation as well. And I think it's then put even more so on the parent or caregiver to give that support, because when they're 9, there's only so much you can do to provide that. And again, one of the greatest things that I think that we've done through the foundation is having Camp Watch Me and getting all of these kids together, and they create lifelong friends. The parents create lifelong friends. Like, we all talk, we have a group text. It is this crazy semi-dysfunctional family, but it is a family. And
So it's normal.
yeah, basically. It's normal. But these kids, they have someone to lean on that is around the same age, that has the same condition of that as them, where they don't have to explain their differences. And I think that's a huge aspect of it. When it comes to being a caregiver and dealing with that, hopefully I can have a better answer for you in about 10 years, because we're 8 years in and I still sometimes forget that my child has lymphedema. She's been so well managed, and this past cellulitis infection that she had 2 weeks ago threw me for a loop, and it knocked me right back down. I mean, it is incredible how quickly things can switch with this disease. She's doing really well. Everything is fine. She's totally healthy. She's playing her sports. She's doing basketball and soccer, and then cellulitis infection, and you get knocked right back down. And it's a roller coaster of emotions for her, for me, for my husband. It's a lot. But I think, kind of going back to who are those professionals that have done something extra or have really made a difference, I have to give a shout out to Betty Westbrook, who is our medical advisor for Bryland's Feet. She's the one that brought me the idea of camp and has been my partner ever since. I don't think I've ever met a CLT as involved, dedicated, like just all in as her. And then we have at camp, we have volunteer CLTs that come, and each child gets one CLT that they're designated to for the entire time at camp. And these CLTs, half of them, I would actually probably more like 80 to 90%, have never even seen a kid before. They just want to do something to give back and make a difference. And they do. And they come back every year. They are hooked. And so I have to give a little bit of a shout out to them and just recognize them, because they go above and beyond for these kids. They give the parents their cell phones. So even throughout the year, they have someone that they can reach out to, because kind of like how Kelly was saying, Bryland doesn't actually have a doctor in Arizona that is a go-to doctor. She has her doctor in Boston. She has a doctor in Cleveland, but they're not like her go-to. So I have a pool of CLTs that are our go-to. So I think whether it's medical professionals, doctors, or CLTs, there are people out there that will go above and beyond, and there are people out there that care. It's just, we need a lot more of them to really make a difference and to make a positive impact, because the lack of it right now is causing children or even adults to be misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed. We're not getting proper care to them. They're doing things or not doing certain things because their doctors are saying, oh, the swelling will go away. We'll see how it is in a couple years. And then guess what? They get fibrotic tissue, and now it's irreversible damage. So there are certain professionals out there that make the difference, but we need a lot more of them.
Yeah.
What about you, Patty?
I've kind of had a bit of a roller coaster with it. I agree that the CLTs typically are the best resources. They know what it is. They know how to help. The very first person to diagnose me, like I said earlier, was a CLT. I found somebody locally in my town. I was their first lymphedema patient, and she was wonderful. She's become a really great friend of mine, and she educates other CLTs now. She doesn't have a practice anymore, so I don't get that benefit, but I know that she's out there teaching everybody else. And then I tried to find another CLT, and because I've been dealing with this for so long and I stay curious, I try to find, as much out there as I can. And she actually said to me, I know a piece of the pie, you know the whole pie. There's really nothing else I can do for you. And I was just like, am I supposed to be thankful for that? Because I think I just have a ligament issue that has, probably does have stuff to do with, my conditions. But can you look at me as like a physical therapist and take the lipedema thing out of it?
Out. Yeah.
So it's challenging. It's definitely challenging.
Yeah. I think there's also probably a bit of we can just dump it into one pool. Once they know what you have, we'll just, that's the cause of all your problems.
Yeah.
Right?
And then there's nothing we can do for it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's, again, when we're talking about inequities and really trying to understand how that can be better told back to them, so that they really grasp what they've just said. Sometimes mimicking actually does work sometimes when we mimic back to them what they just said to us, and they go, oh, or, well, yeah, that's what I said. But if you get that moment of clarity with them, I think that's, again, the role is reversed. We're doing the education, right?
Yep.
When I moved to North Carolina, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
When I moved to North Carolina, I went, got to find a doctor. And I'm like, you're like, bing, and so I go and I try to DO. He's still my doctor. But I sat there, and after 15 minutes, he goes, I've learned more about the lymphatic system in 15 minutes than I have in my entire medical career. And I said, good. And I said, problem is I didn't come here. I didn't pay you to teach you. I paid you to help me.
Right.
So when you've seen, like me, I've seen 61 different doctors and surgeons since this happened in 2005. Wow. And I, like, other than taking out my lung that became fibrotic and stuff because of black lymphatics, it's that way every time. And so that's like Brittany's having to, like, think about this. This is a disease that's over 200 million people, and she's having to drive, like, fly her daughter to either Cleveland or Boston, right?
Yeah.
For me to get treatment, I probably would have to go to Boston or Penn, right? Why? It's not a small number. Like, and so, and someone says, well, the doctors need to learn how to make money off of it. Well, first diagnose it. That way we can help find cures for it too.
Right. So I'll go to the next question, because, we're speaking about inclusion in healthcare, equity. The immediate question right now, I'm sure, would lead to the idea of who does that include, and who should it include? So that could be determinants like race, ethnicity, ability, disability, age, gender, sexual orientation, residence, income, wealth, and differences in how you have your home, whether you own, whether you rent, whether you're a full-time worker, whether you're part-time, whether you're retired. What would it look like if equity and inclusion were the starting point for decision-making in a healthcare context? What would that look like? Can anybody see to the future and see what you could see that looking like?
I mean, I think for me personally, I just want to see everybody have the healthcare they need. And so, I mean, it's that simple. Like, if you're sick, you need to get treatment. It doesn't matter what everything else is. And so I think we just have this chronic disease that there's a lot of us that just doesn't get treated. And so I don't know if there's, other than if you have money, you can, like, travel more places. I do know if you don't have money, you can't go to these one or two doctors that can possibly give you treatment. And so I think financially, you're deaf. That's our system here in the United States. And to be honest with you, Canada, because a lot of you guys come here, a lot of people from worldwide come here, or there's treatments I could probably use in Taiwan, and I'm like, but I'm not financially sound enough to travel to Taiwan and get surgeries in Taiwan or anything. So
no, and it's a little daunting too, I think, if you think that you have to travel outside your own country to get the care you should be getting in your own.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we got rid of that with a magic wand and said, okay, all of those other determinants don't exist anymore, or that's where we go, everybody is equal, do you think we can get to that point where we can have that, where that judgment is not already impairing the decision making of what care gets delivered to which person? Because we have to look at this picture as well. For the most part on this screen, we are not an extremely diverse group here tonight.
We are not.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is a determinant in the level of care that gets delivered.
Yep. It's going to take a lot of education. It's going to take a lot of re-education.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you have, we feel unseen. This panel feels unseen.
Yeah.
And we are primarily not a minority.
Yeah. And that's, how do we flip that for people to really understand how devastating it is that, Brittany, you're dealing with children that are from minute ages to our collective ages and older. I met a woman when I was the first summer after I was diagnosed with lymphedema, and she didn't speak a lot of English. Her son walked up to me. His English was very broken. And he said, "What is that on your arm? I think my mom needs that." And thankfully, my fitter, who is also Hardeep's fitter, was able to say, "Deb, send her up here. Let's get her taken care of." And within 2 weeks, had her sorted. She hadn't gone to see a doctor. The fitter got her all directed into the right ways to do it. But every time, and I'm sure all of us, when we're out there and we see, or we're out there and someone sees us, there is an opportunity for us to then allow that person to ask those questions that they desperately need. And for us to give a little bit of guidance. None of us signed up for that job.
No.
Right? That's not the job we signed up for. We're blessed with this lovely thing that we have to live with that gives us a superpower, if you will, to be able to help others.
Yeah.
And by doing that helps ourselves.
Yeah, it does. It does. Anybody else have any input on that one? Or are we all kind of agreed about the same thing?
I agree.
I think we're all pretty much agreed, right?
Yeah.
Access
Yeah.
to treatment and doctors, medical professionals, it should be for everyone.
Yep.
It doesn't matter where you're from, how old you are. It should be for everyone. Plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think there's so much big money involved in insurance and the medical professional.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's what it feels like. It feels like it's big business and we aren't able to support that. So they find ways to not help us.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, like most things, money is always going to have its place there. It should be going to more funding to help us, but we know that there's always a bureaucratic system that we have to work around. Yeah. Kelly, you've gone to the Hill how many times?
A lot.
more than your hands and your feet now, right?
Yeah, and then even when I didn't go, I was sitting here during COVID on Zoom meetings. Even with COVID, I mean, that's one good thing is we were doing Zoom meetings, but
it's a cost involved. People I think that when we're fighting for this equity, when we're fighting for all of this, that everyone is innately able to afford the cost of going for the fight.
No.
And that's not the case. And I think that's also part of the inequality piece is that, we're speaking to people that are working on average of minimum amount of funds because their life deserves the most amount of money.
Yep.
Because that's what you need to be able to live. But to be able to look at it as something that is equal, well, that's still going to cost money. So how do we try and get to that point? So I'll go to the next question, which is, really trying to figure out if The CDC has this definition of the achievement of health equity as when every person has the opportunity to attain his or her full health potential, and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of social position or other socially determined circumstances. Do you think this is attainable? Do you think, there are some kind of structures or mechanisms that could get put in place so that the experts and the healthcare agencies that are now on top deciders become on tap so that we have access to them? They are literally on tap to us instead of being on the top making the decisions, and none of us are getting what we need.
Man, it sure would be lovely. And I think we had some, at least I felt anyways, when Obama was president, we definitely had a lot more.
Yeah.
It seems like we're now still trying to struggle to get back to what was available at that time. And that seemed like such a priority in that presidency.
Yeah.
And it just seems like we're so far from that.
Yeah. You guys have gone through a lot. Ours is going through a lot right now. Other countries are as well. We're not individual in that. I don't think that, we all as different countries have those issues. But I think if we could have somewhere close to a glimmer of that same page idea, that we're all seeing things from the same set of glasses, not the rosy ones, not the ones that, protect us from the sun, the ones that allow us to read and identify and acknowledge every single person in the room. So we are not going to keep you too much longer, but I do have a couple last questions here. So last night we talked about health inequity as being this big and structurally based problem that won't easily be solved. We've kind of illuminated to that tonight, but I think it's important for all of us to focus on the thing better, and for all patients here, now, in the future, and as we work towards this idea of health equity. Patients knowing a pathway. What would you suggest practitioners could do to help bridge that gap and to create more awareness of these issues for themselves? Like, how do we get them more engaged? And what additional advice would you offer to patients to ensure that they can advocate for themselves and get the most equitable care? Two big juicy ones.
For me, I think the biggest impact we have in the lipedema community is when you get the medical professionals and the patients on the same panel and they're sharing this type of discussion, because one feeds the other and the other, it's a volley. And you leave feeling hopeful. You feel that you've been seen. They leave having a better insight into what it's like to live with this condition. And I think if there was a way to bring that to, not just a lipedema patient roundtable, but to the regular medical professionals and really listening to patients, I think it really just goes so far. And I hear it from the medical professionals on the panel as well, that they really value being in that group with us and hearing what we have to say. And it makes them think of other things,
right,
that they wouldn't have thought of, or in the way that we're explaining it, So that is my big, that's what I love.
That's great too, because it's like sitting at the family table. You're sharing that platter of food, you're passing it around, and people are going, oh, they dressed it that way, or they're eating it with their fork that different way. I think that incites ideas more fluidly than a piece of paper that gets shoved in front of their face.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be nice to do that just with the regular world, not even our communities, but just in general, the health community, having patients have a voice and feel seen and understood. So I don't know how we do that.
I know.
I can tell you, I've started actually being able to get access and talk to doctors about different things. And one of the ways I've done that is it's kind of like the same thing you do, because I like to create bonds or community or friends everywhere I go. So everywhere I shop, I like know people, and so I realized like we're always yelling at the doctors because they don't know and getting mad at them and frustrated. And so I kind of said, "So what can I do to help you?" That switch it changed my approach, and it let them know I'm not really like, what can I do to help you help others? And believe it or not, it has opened doors. And so that's why I'm like, the doctors are, I mean, you get 15 here in the States, and I'm pretty sure it's the same, 15 minutes. I mean, I see them on watches, so they got to go. So they don't get it for chronic disease, they don't get enough time. So change the dynamic. So like they're asking me about patients, and I don't get frustrated anymore. I'm like, so I start giving them answers. I was like, here, I'll email you this research, or here's where this person can possibly get help. And so establish that relationship. I think that's where we need to go with all this, is quit establishing like boundaries, establish relationships with each other. I mean, as a patient advocate, like when I'm sitting in a room, and like when I first got there, I was the
fired up one.
I was, but there's more. And so you like establish those relationships. That's how we like, I mean, I knew every one of you when I came on, and I'm like, or I'd seen you, like, and so, like, establish relationships with each other, but not establish relationships with your doctor. I mean, and be a little understanding, because they've got the restrictions, and they're battling the same health insurance people we are.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of helps them say, well, that's the guy I want to help if I can.
True.
Yep.
So
I would agree. What about you, Hardeep?
So one of the things that stood out to me yesterday about the live panel discussion that you had with the medical professionals was one of the, I don't remember their name, but one of the healthcare professionals saying that doctors don't spend that much time with their patients. Like, it's the way the medical system is set up, it's just like very quick. You're seeing as many patients as you can, because at the end of the day, it's a money-making institution, right? So I think what would help is if doctors in general just took more time with their patients to talk, to understand what's going on, to ask questions. That's fine too. I just feel like it's so rushed every time I go to the doctor for anything. I have other health conditions too. So just in general, I just think as a general rule to like spend a little bit more time with their patients. I'm not saying like sit there for hours, but like, like 10, 15 solid minutes of just like talking about the problem instead of just like rushing them out. I think that would be helpful.
I don't disagree. I wish that we could have more time with them, but it is a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to leave this as a closing statement here. Asking questions is a path to action. Answers can point to actions that eliminate unjust barriers. So I think if we stay in the mindset of asking those questions and paying it forward and providing, like you said, Kelly, creating that relationship, offering solutions to those practitioners, we might just see the shift. I want to thank you all for being part of this active discussion tonight. And I apologize I didn't get to say goodbye to Brittany, but she had to go. She's got a kid to take care of. Sorry, let me say, she's got 4 kids to take care of. Yeah. So I want to thank you all again, and I wish everyone well. And if you've got comments or concerns, or you want to talk more with us about some actions you can take, please reach out to us. You know how to find us at Conversationally Thriving with Lymphedema. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Sorry about that.